The mystery of the missing mother. On July 13, 2010, a call came into the Oakland police station. A man with a trembling voice told the dispatcher, "I want to report my ex-girlfriend missing. She was supposed to come by to pick up our son, but never showed up. She isn't answering her phone, and none of her relatives know where she is." The police eagerly began investigating the case, unaware of the secrets Carmen Thomas had kept hidden from her family. Little dancer. Carmen's life was challenging from the very beginning. Born on October 30th, 1977, she arrived severely premature and spent her first months in the hospital. As she grew, Carmen faced ongoing health issues and stood at only 61 inches, 155 centimeters tall. Despite these difficulties, she was cheerful and radiated energy. "She'll probably become a dancer one day," her mother joked, as Carmen could hardly sit still for more than 5 minutes. Years passed, and Carmen remained vibrant, charismatic, witty, and fun-loving, always seeking the spotlight. Fearless and adventurous, she loved exploring new places and making friends. Thus, when her family moved from rainy Leeds in England to sunny Durban, the third largest city in South Africa, Carmen was thrilled. Changes. The Thomas family thrived in Africa. They traveled extensively, went diving, and enjoyed beach days. However, this idyllic life shattered in 1987 when Carmen's father, Neville, died in an accident. The young girl fell into a deep depression for 3 months. She not only refused to attend school, but also isolated herself in her room. According to her mother Teresa's memories, Carmen stopped smiling altogether. It took 3 long years for her to fully recover. Teresa fared better after the tragedy. A year later, she met a man with whom she started a serious relationship and soon remarried. This brought Carmen a stepfather and new half-siblings. Thanks to their support, she began to emerge from her depression. But the changes didn't stop there. The next significant event for the Thomas family was moving back to England to be closer to Teresa's parents. Like a duck to water. When Carmen returned to her homeland in 1990, she felt like a fish in water. The girl completely stopped feeling down. Her cheerful spirit came back, and a smile once again lit up her face. Carmen quickly made new friends and soon became the most popular girl in school. As she entered her teenage years, a rebellious streak emerged. To her mother's dismay, the young lady would sneak out of the house to hang out at parties or wander around the city at night. As Carmen was finishing school, Teresa suddenly decided to return to South Africa, but her eldest daughter was not enthusiastic about it at all. The girl much preferred England. She suggested that her mother go alone, leaving her in the care of her grandparents. They agreed on that. One might expect that without parental supervision, Carmen would go wild, but that didn't happen. She successfully graduated from school and enrolled at the University of Southampton in 1995 to study marketing. Despite her love for partying, Carmen surprisingly excelled academically. According to her classmates, she was one of the best students in her year, and professors predicted a bright future for her. Another obstacle. In 2000, Carmen was set to defend her thesis, but a few months before graduation, she suddenly fell ill and had to go to the hospital. The 23-year-old thought it was just a minor ailment, so when the doctor informed her that she had cancer, specifically gynecological cancer, the brilliant student could hardly believe it at first. However, she managed to pull herself together and focus on treatment. Carmen endured chemotherapy very poorly, which forced her to put her studies on hold for a year and a half until she finally defeated the illness. The bad news was that due to the treatment she underwent, Carmen's chances of getting pregnant were extremely low. This news was a severe shock for the girl who dreamed of having a large family. But Carmen accepted this as well. She decided to focus on her career instead. In 2002, she graduated from university and set off to conquer London with her diploma under her arm. There, Carmen landed a job at a major advertising agency and immersed herself in work wholeheartedly. At the same time, she didn't forget about leisure. She could often be spotted at popular nightclubs in London among famous and influential people. An unexpected encounter. During one of these outings, Carmen met New Zealander Bradford Callahan. Friends and acquaintances called him Brad, who was a year younger than her. He came from a wealthy family that owned a construction company in Oakland. Brad had come to London to study, but was described by acquaintances as a pretty smart guy who showed little interest in academics. He preferred spending his time at parties. They hit it off right away and soon became inseparable. After 2 months, Carmen and Brad decided to move in together into a cozy apartment in central London. Unfortunately, their life together could hardly be called happy. Every 2 or 3 weeks, they would argue, break up, and then reconcile again. This cycle continued for just over a year until an unexpected turn of events occurred in 2004. A little miracle. In 2004, Carmen discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy, especially since just a few years earlier, doctors had told her that having a child was nearly impossible. From that moment on, Carmen couldn't think about anything else but her future baby. She put work and all other matters aside, doing everything she could to ensure the baby would be born healthy. The joyful news also affected Brad. He tried hard to accept Carmen as she was, but after 6 months, his enthusiasm waned. So when Carmen gave birth to a boy named Jack in March 2005, Brad told her that their relationship was beyond repair. He assured Carmen that he would support her and their son financially, but returned to New Zealand, where he took a job as a construction engineer with his parents' company. Moving. For the next year, Carmen raised her son alone. Throughout this time, she couldn't shake the thought of how much Jack would miss out on growing up without his father. Carmen drew from her own experience. She lost her father at the age of 10, which became one of the hardest challenges of her life. She didn't want Jack to endure something similar. In 2008, Carmen moved from England to New Zealand, renting an apartment in the same Oakland neighborhood where Jack's father lived. At that time, Brad was dating another woman named Tanita, but despite having a girlfriend, he welcomed the arrival of his ex and always made time to spend with his son. Side job. The following year, Brad and Tanita got married, and in early 2010, Tanita informed her husband that she was expecting a child. Meanwhile, things weren't going well for Carmen. She struggled to find decent work in New Zealand. The child support payments from Jack's father barely covered rent and food, leading Carmen to take a job on the streets by the end of 2009. Carmen kept her side job a secret from everyone except Brad and Tanita, who were aware of how she made ends meet. Unsurprisingly, Brad disapproved. He tried to influence the mother of his child, and their conversations often ended in arguments. Tanita witnessed one such confrontation. He told her, "Think about what Jack will say when he learns about your profession." Carmen got angry but composed herself and replied, "This is just temporary until I find a proper job. Besides, my life is none of your business. It's up to me how I earn." Tanita recounted this exchange. Disappearance. On July 13th, 2010, a couple of months after the aforementioned conversation, a call came into the Oakland police station. Brad Callahan, on the other end of the line, informed the dispatcher that he had been unable to reach his ex-girlfriend, Carmen Thomas, who was supposed to pick up their son. "When was the last time you saw or spoke with Carmen?" asked the dispatcher. "I'm not exactly sure." "About 2 weeks ago," Brad replied after a brief pause. Later, during an interrogation, he clarified that on July 1st, 2010, Carmen had dropped off their son and asked him to look after him for a couple of days or maybe longer. "She told me she was going to Hamilton, located about 120 kilometers from Oakland. I think she had a meeting with a client. We exchanged texts for a few days, but then Carmen suddenly stopped responding," Brad told the detectives. Misty. The police began their investigation in Hamilton. It was there that Carmen's car was found on July 16th. The vehicle, with its doors locked, was parked at an upscale residential complex. Upon unlocking the doors, detectives discovered many personal items belonging to the missing woman inside. A suitcase with clothes, a makeup bag, keys to her rental apartment, and a wallet containing cash and bank cards. Interestingly, in the glove compartment were 2 envelopes. One was labeled Misty, the pseudonym Carmen used at work. Inside was $1,000 in cash and a note that read, "Thank you, dear." The envelope and money suggested that Carmen had indeed met with a client in Hamilton. In the second envelope, detectives found a letter from her landlord demanding payment of $600 for overdue rent. Theories. At the beginning of the investigation, police considered 3 theories: trouble related to her job, a recurrence of cancer requiring immediate treatment, or an escape to cope with everyday problems. However, detectives could not link Carmen's disappearance to any of her clients. She was also not found in New Zealand hospitals. When it came to the idea of an escape, her family and friends unanimously stated that she would never abandon her 5-year-old son. Consequently, police decided to focus on the only remaining suspect, her ex-partner, who at first glance seemed unlikely to be involved in the disappearance of his child's mother. Brad cooperated willingly with law enforcement, helping Carmen's family and friends distribute flyers about her disappearance, and even agreeing to take a polygraph test. The results were inconclusive. Everything changed when experts thoroughly searched Brad's apartment and found shoes with a tiny drop of blood belonging to Carmen. Evidence. The man explained that his ex-girlfriend had cut herself on a knife when she visited him one day, but the police decided to continue their investigation in that direction. And for good reason. According to data from the cell phone provider, Carmen's phone was located in Hamilton on the evening of July 1st. When the police requested data on Brad's phone, it turned out that he was near the device belonging to the missing woman at that time. However, the definitive proof of the man's guilt came from Carmen's neighbor's testimony. According to her, on the evening of June 28th, she heard strange noises coming from Carmen's apartment. It sounded like a fight. Then I heard a sharp scream, and everything went silent. I went to her door and knocked. After about half a minute, Brad appeared. He was only in boxers and a t-shirt, which had red stains on it. He said that Carmen had felt unwell during dinner and spilled wine on him. Then he added, "If she doesn't feel better in a few hours, I'll take her to the hospital," the witness reported. The secret. In September 2010, Brad was arrested on suspicion of committing a crime and obstructing justice. The man refused to plead guilty, but detectives gathered enough evidence to reconstruct what happened. They believe that on June 28th, Brad met with his former partner in her apartment to discuss issues regarding Jack. The child was with Tanita at preschool. He was being bullied by other kids. Carmen wanted to transfer her son to another institution, but the man opposed it. In the heat of the argument, she threw these words at him: "You have no say because you're not his father." How did the police learn about this? They established that on June 29th, the day after, Brad visited a private clinic in Oakland under a fictitious name and requested a DNA test to determine his relationship with Jack. The result was negative. Brad was not Jack's biological father. Now, let's return to the evening of June 28th. It can be assumed that at that moment this news drove Brad into a rage, and he grabbed the first thing he could find: a baseball bat belonging to Jack. After committing the crime, he called his friend Steve. "Could you bring me 3 large garbage bags and an axe?" Just discreetly, Brad asked. The punishment. If Steve found this request suspicious, he still did what his friend asked. Over the next few hours, Brad filled 3 bags, which he took to a wooded area near the Waitakere Range early in the morning and buried in a shallow grave. After that, Brad cleaned Carmen's entire apartment so that no traces remained. It is worth noting that he succeeded. Police found no evidence in her home. In the following days, Brad tried to create the illusion that Carmen was alive. He sent text messages from her phone to friends and relatives who were concerned about her well-being. Then Brad packed Carmen's belongings into his car and drove it to Hamilton. Before returning to Oakland, he placed an envelope with money in the glove compartment. He destroyed the phone shortly after. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Brad Callahan pleaded guilty. On March 30th, 2012, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 13 years. It's outrageous. My daughter can never come back, and he could be free as early as 2023, said Carmen's mother, Teresa, to reporters after the verdict was announced. According to New Zealand media reports, in autumn 2023, Brad Callahan indeed applied for parole. However, his request was denied, so he remains in prison. The next opportunity for him will be only in 2028. As for Jack, he was taken in by his grandmother, Teresa, Carmen's mother. The boy lives in South Africa and has never made any comments about his mother or father.